Hello, friends. Welcome to Off-Nominal. The first time that we've been changing up our pre-show format, Jake, where we're tweeting and tooting, and
Yes.
we were sort of mixed up for a second about how technology works. But we officially made it with our friend Ben Feist. Feist as in feisty, which I feel like you are about to get a Mastodon account, it sounds like, so maybe you should be at feisty.
Yeah, I'm sure my name is already taken. We'll see.
Well, the best part about Mastodon is your name's not taken anywhere, because you could sign up on anything and then be whatever you want. So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I bet there's
That's
not
why
a
I signed up for
feisty.
Elon Musk at Space.
I bet there's not a feisty. There's no feisty yet. You could be feisty at spacey.space.
You could just start up your own Mastodon server and then be feisty at feisty.
But then I could never actually say that to anybody if I was that. So, I don't think so.
Well, that was a terrible intro. I'm sorry for derailing us entirely. Hi, Jake. What? Please help us get back on the rails.
Okay. Well, you want to do drinks? I can do that. That's something I have in front of me. So I made a mezcalita today. So I did it all properly with the Tajin salt on the edge, some limes in there, a little bit of mezcal, a little bit of orange liqueur. So bottoms up. Cheers.
Fancy.
Thanks for being here, Ben.
Ben, what you got?
Oh, my pleasure. Nothing. I should have gone first because I have nothing to follow that up. I just have a scotch on the rocks.
That's pretty fancy, though.
Hey,
delicious.
that's good. I'm actually jealous of that though because I can't drink scotch anymore. I became allergic to it somehow. If I have a glass of scotch now, the next day I feel like I have a cold, like every time. So I just can't do it anymore.
My wallet is allergic to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, brown liquors don't work for me at all.
No.
It's a quirk of my system. It just doesn't work with me at all. So that's not what I got. I got a thematic drink, Jake. I found this beer at the local beer store. It's called Synthetic Echoes, which I feel like is a good descriptor of Ben's projects.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that is my brewery, so there you go. It's a very good choice.
First State Brewery. This is Ben's. He's moved to Delaware and set up First State Brewing Company. So here we go. It's the tall boy, Jake.
All right. That's nice. I saw 8% on there. Is this going to be a good show?
8% tall boy, and I'm ready to talk about. I'm ready to just the entire time that we're doing this, ask Ben why Apollo 12 does not exist on Apollo in real time, which we covered before the show. It's because he hates Pete Conrad personally. So now we can move on and actually dig into what has always been to me the project I've been most mystified by. So I'm very excited about this.
You're mystified by Apollo in real time.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a mesmerizing project. It's just there's so much to it. There's the technical side, there's the historical side, there's just a lot that we got to talk about. So I don't know where the right spot to start is, but maybe why Apollo in real time? Where did it come from?
Yeah, well, that's wow. This is like a therapy session if that's the case, because this was a side project. I did it for fun because I like making multimedia projects. That's what I've always done for years and years. And early on in the 90s, I came across the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. I don't know if you guys have seen that website, but it's been up since 93. It's still up. It's was the richest material I've ever seen. It was like this is what the internet is for. It was my reaction when I saw it, because it was through dial-up in 1995 or so. It came onto my computer and I could read the transcripts of what they actually said when people were on the moon. And it's hard for anybody today to remember that moment back then, but you used to have to go to a library at a specific institution to get access to that kind of material. And hypertext really changed the landscape of that. And this became a very well-developed, and it was already very well-developed back then, archive of the Apollo missions. And I thought, in the mid-90s, I was like, we had a lot of technology and not a lot of ideas of what to do with it. So we used to have these people, we would refer to any creative people that worked on the internet as content providers. I don't know if you ever heard that term. It's like, how hilarious, right? Like, it's like, we have all this stuff, we just don't know what to put on it. And here was the richest content I could have imagined. I probably had just watched the Apollo 13 movie, which had come out, and here's the real stuff, right? Anyway, so Apollo in Real Time was always an idea of, wouldn't it be awesome to have all of that material together in a multimedia project? So it wasn't just a hypertext project like the Surface Journal, but it was, what if you could read the transcripts while you were listening to the crew, while you saw the TV footage, and you like it? But it was way too big a project to even conceive of doing back then. That was the era of like Real Media Player, that you were waiting for like 10 minutes for 5 minutes of audio to buffer so you could hear it over the internet. It's crazy. Here we are on a live YouTube stream.
Through satellites to Jake too.
Yeah, through Starlink. Yeah, no, insane. Anyway, so that like it turned out Apollo 17 would have been over 100 CD-ROMs in size. Like if I had built it with CD-ROMs, like the 90s technology. So it just kind of followed me around through the years until technology started catching up, and I eventually took a shot at it. And I didn't want to just do part of the mission. I wanted to contribute to the Apollo Flight Journal, which is the flight kind of companion to the Surface Journal, that was missing Apollo 17. So I kind of took on the effort of cleaning some of that historical data for the Flight Journal. And this material in Apollo in Real Time has been donated back to the Flight Journal, so it's complete now with 17. But really, I could have just done like a little example. What if I just did the landing, or I did one of the EVAs? But I always knew that the cool stuff was like, do it the hard way. It's going to be so much more impactful to people to check it out if it's everything. So, and I'm not really trying to make I had no deadline. I wasn't trying to make anything out of it. I just wanted to do it for fun. So I spent 6 years doing it before I put it out there. So it was like, do it the hard way and take forever on evenings and weekends. Not every evening or every weekend, but just keep pecking away at it. And then when I put it online, it was 302 hours long and contained all of the photos and all, everything that you see today. It's gotten better over time. It's more accurate over time, but not a lot more material has been added since it went live and it was in 2015. So for Apollo 17. So I don't know if that answers why, but it was just like, as my dad used to say, it demanded to be made, on its own.
This is a theme that we've had like many times on this show where, and I'm going to forget all the examples where like we've talked to Jonathan McDowell, who has like, he is compelled to make a list of every object that has went to space and where it currently is. He can't not do that. And I feel like you just expressed a similar sentiment. It was like, I don't know why, I couldn't not do this project. And something in my brain made me do it.
And then you have kind of this, what's the fallacy called when you've like sunk too much time into something and starts to have more value than it should have. Well, I've done that. I did that. I let that propel me through this project. Like I, had put in many years, and I was just like, "What am I doing? This is never going to get finished." And I'd stop for months, and then, it would slowly call me back as a little thought, like, what was the last technical problem I was trying to solve, or what stage was I in again? And then, next thing you know, I've got it open, and I've been working on it for a couple hours. So, and a hobby is a job you can quit anytime. So. There was no pressure. Like, this has really taught me a lot about work, because if you just do it because it demanded to be done on its own and you have no deadline or external pressure, you can make anything. Anybody could make anything. You just have to spend the time. And like I always worked in the internet world. And I remember thinking things like, wow, I wish I worked for that other agency that just won NASA as a client, so that I could work on NASA things. And then how foolish, right? You can work on that. I just showed you can work on NASA things. Just do it yourself, right? You don't have to get paid. Anyway, that's kind of the crux of it.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, I love the brilliance of this thing, of course, is just like you said, like having everything together. And it's not just like you go and find the information you want. It presents an experience to you. Like it's almost every year when there's the anniversary of one of the things, I just pop it up on that day and I just kind of like, sit through the launch or sit through the land and just find a spot that I want to just kind of sit and watch, almost like it's it's like a TV show almost, and you get everything at once. And I always learn something new when I do it, and that's what I love about it. So I don't know if you said 302 hours long for Apollo 17. Like that's too much to. I mean, that's more than that's like more Doctor Who episodes, like that's a lot of content to watch. You can't just go and sit down and watch it all. And so it's like, it's almost evergreen in that way, and that you can always come back to it and keep experiencing it. So I love it. I don't know. I'm really excited that we're able to talk to you about it, because this is one of my favorite things on the internet. This is what the internet is for to me.
Oh, thank you. 302 hours long. I remember the whole time I was making it thinking like, no one's going to watch this thing. Like what? It didn't even occur to me that it was the drop in, drop out audience. Like, come and, check out the moment a photo was taken, but then stay accidentally for 45 minutes while you're watching the rest of that period of time on this mission. Right. Mm-hmm. Is it turned into like tweet length, things that you might want to drop in to check out. So it actually had legs to it that I did not anticipate. I thought it was just going to be for like, hyper enthusiasts that really wanted to dig in. And actually what it turned out to be was for people that aren't hyper enthusiasts that get to actually see what happened on the mission for however long they want. So that's another lesson for me. It's never going to be what you expect it to be. It's just going to turn into whatever it is after you're done. And so other people are going to decide what it's useful for.
Yeah. No,
these are the funny things though, that like I almost feel bad that, and it might be because it's so hard to actually access this outside of what you've done, is that like I feel bad that I haven't watched every second of a human that has been on the lunar surface. Like, how have I not sat through literally every second of somebody walking on the moon, right? And we haven't, because I don't know what, it happened before our time, so we weren't tapped into it at the time, and we've read and watched every piece of media that there is about the moon landing, so we feel like we know it really well, but yet we don't know every little tiny moment of the mission. Mm-hmm. And partially it's like, I don't actually know where to go to find that in its entirety. It's spread through, like you're saying, these sites that have been up since 93, like the first websites that ever existed were like every bit of transcript. But it's not put out there in an accessible format, which might have been part of the reason that you were like, I need to make this a thing that exists in the world so that I can do that. And that's why, like at the beginning, I said this is a mesmerizing project, because I feel like on these missions I have seen the whole thing, but I haven't seen like, every time that John Young was driving the rover around. I haven't seen all the miles that he put on that thing, and I feel like a bad space nerd because of that.
No, but I think that's you've caught on to what the same reaction I got when I found the Lunar Surface Journal, right? Which was, here it all is. How do I just absorb all this? And you quickly realize it's impossible, because it's just so much material that you're never going to become that. And then, that's my on the ground version of learning what a historian is, yes, you don't ever know everything, of course, but how often do we get that? I mean, there's, maybe you and I are just similarly wired that when we see this material, we see it for crazy value, right? Other people don't, right? I mean, there's people in the world that, you stop someone on the street and ask them about this topic, they may not be interested at all, right? So I think it's important for people to just find the topic that they're interested in and try to do something if they can to dig in like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's a tremendous value from a historical standpoint. Like you said, learning how to be a historian, like documenting this kind of thing. Like obviously it was a well-documented event to start with, just because everybody knew it was going to be a big deal, but preserving it and transforming it into new mediums is like, it's an important job that's going to continue long after we're all gone, like it's something that we need to always kind of keep track of. And I know that like other historians would love to have something like that, someone 200 years from now is going to really be happy that this exists, because they're going to be able to use it to understand Apollo at much distance, right? Like imagine if we had something like this for, I don't know, like the Civil War, or go back further, like, you know, if we could watch the Roman Senate for a day, or just you have all the footage for the inside the Roman Senate, like how amazing that would be, how much you would learn from that, right? And so it's great that this
exists. and it really changes. Sorry to interrupt, but it really another thing I've learned about is that it changes greatly what history is, because this is direct primary material that we can see events happening, right? Mm-hmm. And we are not reading a book about it. We're not reading an interview by somebody who was there about it. And I don't. Maybe we'll get into it, but for the other two missions that are on Apollo in real time, what we have is this treasure trove of audio that was recorded in Mission Control, and it's coming for 17, but it's still stuck in the National Archives right now to be digitized. But so for Apollo 11, there's 11,000 hours of audio in Apollo in real time that is everybody in Mission Control. You can literally sit in any position in Mission Control and for the whole mission, and hear what those people running that positioning in Mission Control were doing. So, yeah, there you go. That's the interface for it.
You said 11,000 hours?
Yes, it's 11,000 hours. It's a lot of hosting. There's a lot of hosting.
I was just going to say, why are you keeping this?
Anyway, so what this does is it allows us to actually understand what did they do during Apollo 13 to save the mission and Mission Control. Not the like bombastic generalization of that. And when I put 13 online, actually, I heard from flight director Jerry Griffin, and I told him that, hey, this is going to go live. And he said, oh boy, I can hardly wait to see if all the stories I've been telling for 50 years actually happen. You know, like, but you know, he was tongue in cheek, of course, but he's right. I mean,
only a little bit. Yeah, you're gonna misremember it every time you tell the story, and you know.
That's right.
All of a sudden, you were drinking a glass of scotch while you were in Mission Control because he told it wrong once, and you like whispered down the lane to yourself, you know.
Yeah, and you add something like the based on a true story movie, and then people start actually remembering things that happened in the movie as events that happened in the mission that didn't happen. You know, we've seen examples of that all over the place. This is I think a type of correction for historical truth that we get to have now. I mean, for everything. If you think of every Instagram photo that's taken, like that's kind of a timeline and a location. You know, if Facebook were so desired to do it, they could create that bar that night in real time. You know, based on the things that are being shared and videos being recorded, etc. Like we could really transform how history is recorded now that we have the technology. It's just we haven't really gone there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I heard something recently. Now I'm going to misremember the details, but it's a grim example. But what you were saying about like memories that have been misremembered. Somebody recently wrote a book about Bloody Sunday, and they had there was this big state investigation into Bloody Sunday, and it was something about like somebody had placed broken eyeglasses somewhere very specific that they were able to track down as like a piece of evidence. And during the investigation of this, 28 different people said they were the ones that put these eyeglasses like on the curb or something like that. So nobody knows who actually did it, because 28 people remember that they did it. And it was because when your brain's in those situations, you're going to like rewrite stuff in your head as you like rethink about it, think about it over and over again. But the fact that you have like what everyone said on a mission, I'm thinking about when we're finally back at the moon and we're at one of these landing sites and we're like, okay, let's find what's still here and where they left stuff and where things got blasted after liftoff. You're going to be able to go back through here and listen to, somebody talk about where they placed their tool or where they put the thing down or where like general relativity references. Like it was to the left of where I was. Where's that orange rock at? And the fact that you can like piece that all back together from actual evidence rather than, people that have written down books from somebody who's told them a story in a bar 200 years ago. Like that's going to be pretty wild to be able to go to the site and have, Yeah, I mean, you've just created the audio tour experience at the Apollo 11 landing site. Like, whether you know it or not, right. You just did it. Yeah.
Well, you just described my current job at NASA to try to preserve that context of what's happening on Artemis, and also how do you plan for things that we're going to do, and then relate what actually happened to what was actually planned to do. Because NASA saw Apollo in real time, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to organize our data like you have for Apollo. Like, how can we do this so that no one has to do what you did in the future? It just gets collected that way." And eventually, that turned into, "Would you like to be a contractor here?" And of course, I leapt at it. I mean, I was doing all this stuff because it was very exciting to me, and now I had been offered to come in and help with the return to the moon. Are you kidding me? Yes.
Did you have a sense at any point when you were working on the project that was going to be a thing that occurred in your future? Because I feel, or you had no sense that this was going to be a thing that anyone looked at, or do you think this was like, no, this is Ben's fun project that 10 people will see?
Well, I mean, I was trying to make something that was a cool experience, like you said. Like, it was the experience side was what I was trying to make happen. I didn't know I was making something that would like provide context to, all the lunar samples that were collected, for example, which it has done. I had that all explained to me after the fact. So I wasn't, thinking, if I do a great job of demoing this, then NASA's going to hire me because there's a clear reason for this. Like, because I was really just going for the something cool kind of impact. And then, like I said, I had to have it explained to me that it actually made a tool. So now that I understand that, I'm making a tool for Artemis.
So does that mean we're going to get Artemis 3 in real time? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, yes. But the issue is going to be whether it's in real time or is it in post-mission real time like Apollo. So there's issues at hand there within NASA about exporting data in real time and what can be exported.
Oh, do we know?
Etc. You do? Okay. Sorry to bore your listeners with export.
Oh no, I'm just giving you crap because of ITAR. ITAR was the reason we didn't know about like weather constraints or something. I don't remember what the drama was at this point. I put that in the back of my head, but.
Okay. Yeah, so that has to be carefully managed, and we want to make sure that that could happen. But there is a process right now where EVAs on ISS are live on YouTube, so you could argue that it's the same deal. And but of course, this would be more than just a YouTube stream. This would be multimedia if we could get it right. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great to have all the telemetry of everything that's happening on the surface?
Sure would. It sure would, Ben.
Yeah. Heart rates. I want to see how cool Victor Glover is when he steps out on the moon. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I want the AR goggle.
No crew data. No crew data.
No crew data. All right. Man. Well, you get the historic story of what was it? John Young, who had like a heart rate of like 50 or whatever on liftoff. It wasn't 50, but it seemed like it based on the retelling of that.
Yeah. I still remember his old joke about that. He was like, when asked about it, he said, "Yeah, but I told him I was too old for it to go any faster." Which is classic.
How exciting he is about everything. Yeah. You mentioned about so lessons learned and how to store this data or how to capture it today and store it like you have. What was the process for you to figure out, you had that old website where you could read all the transcript, but did you take all the data you could find and like transform it in particular ways? How did you figure out how to actually do this kind of like archival storage system?
Yeah, well, it was really just make everything about time, obsessively in both the interface and in the data. I wasn't trying to like correct too much of the data. I was really just trying to figure out where was that photo taken, when was that photo taken in the timeline, and then put it there in its raw form. Like I'm not curating the best photos or something like that. It was just give everything timestamps. So of course that started with the transcript and all the audio. So that was 99% of the effort. And then the context of that actually helps to place all the TV transmissions, where you can kind of stretch and pull, because you got to remember this is all analog material, so it's all warbling and moving in time. It's not locked in with a time code or anything. So there was a lot of kind of nudging and tucking, and it's not exact. I mean, it's just, if you look at the time when something happens on Apollo in real time, give it a plus or minus a few seconds, right? Because it's going to be, I had to turn it into a digital timeline and then force everything into it. For Apollo 11 and 13, those actually are much closer to real time, because it turns out all those recordings of Mission Control did have a time code on track 1 of those 30 track tapes. And it's the only historical time code recorded that we've ever found anywhere. And it's for the duration of the mission. So we can there was a long process of correcting those audio tapes so that actually was like a digital, because you're still playing back on analog tapes, but they have a time code, and we know the spec of the time code, so we can twist the digitized recordings back into historically accurate time. And that was a big computer science effort led by other people that are on the team. So that panel you opened, that's how we can go to any point in the mission and actually hear it, is because we've done that processing on using the time code on track 1 and then correcting all the adjacent tracks. Anyway, then we can use that to as the sort of source of truth. And then when a video recording of TV transmissions or something needs to get placed, we know precisely where it goes in the actual timeline. And it doesn't matter if that video is like wobbling around, because it started at the right time.
I imagine like that wouldn't be just it's probably much worse with analog, but it's even a problem with digital, right? Because if you get some video at 48,000 hertz, and then you get an audio track at 44, whatever it is, 44.1, those get out of sync pretty quickly, right? Like they can fall out of line. So I imagine analog, it must be just wild to try and force into some sort of rigid binary system, right? Huh.
Oh yeah, well these were 16-hour-long tapes, and they drifted over an hour and a half. And they didn't drift in a linear fashion. They drifted like fast, slow, like it got warm in the room and things changed. Like it was total Wild West.
You could see what the HVAC setting was at. Like,
yeah.
Wow. I love these moments
so
we're watching right now. Where
kudos to whoever in 1968 put the spec in that there was going to be an IRIG B time code on track 1, because here we are 50 odd years later using it in a way they definitely never anticipated.
No.
These moments when you're showing the pictures they're taking as it's happening are the coolest part when they're on the surface, and you see like, this here he is hopping around the surface, and then here's these very sun-washed photos that they're taking. It's it makes it. I don't know if it's the fact that the photos are like actual resolution versus the video that was broadcast on TV back in the day, but it just makes it feel so like, you could see how this would come about in this day and age, and yet like it would feel so expected to have that real-time high-resolution imagery of what they're doing on the surface. But since we never had that until somebody like you just painstakingly went through 11,000 hours of audio and tried to timestamp imagery, it's crazy. But
now, if you can get the clock in the camera set correctly, then you get timestamps on every photo that's taken, right? And that asterisk is a big if in space. But
honestly, it's a big if on Earth. You pop the battery out of your GoPro for 1 second and everything's shot. So it's like, now I've got to go use the adjust date and timestamp operations in my Photos app, and then it's all out of whack, and you're like, I no longer care about this because I'm not Ben.
Yeah. Well, so that if you can think of it as, if I was, I don't know, if in some position at NASA and I could go around and, suggest that people set the clocks correctly on their cameras, they would all say, what for? They're close enough, or sure, we will, but it would be unclear why it mattered. But what's happening is everybody sees this, like they see Apollo in real time, and now subsequently a project that we've made internally at NASA that replays all the ISS EVAs and everything else that happens on ISS. And they want to know why the photos aren't lined up exactly right. And we can go, hey, you should set the clocks. And they'll go, great, we'll get right on that because we want this to be better. So it's, it doesn't have to be this like medicine coming from an external group saying, please do the thing we need you to do. They're saying, what can we do to make it better? Which is a wonderful place to be because you've kind of given them enough of a demo. And what the hope is if this happens across enough groups, that there's going to be, spec level mission definition for all the stuff that happens on Artemis, so that this is just part of what they do. Because it's now clear what the value, it's a growing awareness of the value of context with a capital C as something that should be preserved across data. And these tools that myself and the team that I work on have made are doing a really great job of spreading that word throughout the organization.
Yeah. The context part is really big. I don't know how much how much interaction you have with people that are actually leveraging this as a tool, because I know the geologists should be able to absolutely use this as real, real data in a paper and actually publish on something to be able to say okay, using the data from Apollo in real time, we know this sample was this far from here and blah, 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 and do all these kind of things with it, because that's geology is context. That's the whole point of it, basically, is to try and figure out what's happening around it. Right. And this has got to be a useful tool for that.
Yeah. And it was the geologists at NASA who originally got in touch with me. The first person was Noah Petro at Goddard, who's the LRO project scientist. And he said, do you know what you've made? And he was very excited as a geologist that, suddenly there is context for the samples. Actually, I can give you a live demo if you like. If you go on the website now and type in a 5-digit sample number, I can show you how to do that. So the little magnifying glass, if you can find that tiny button.
Got it.
Type in 761 and see if you can see a sample number. There you go. Those bottom ones are sample numbers.
I sure can.
Click one, and then the transcript has a white underlined link in it. Click the white underlined
down here.
link.
Where am I seeing it?
Maybe it didn't.
Can you make it bigger, Anthony?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You picked a random one.
I thought you knew a number. You were like 761.
Click,
I was like, damn, he knows every sample.
The bottom one, 76720.
Got it. There it is.
You go.
46 Yankee.
Oh, great. You picked one that has nothing. Okay.
You told me 761.
This is what happens with live demos.
How about 76130? How about that?
Okay.
47 Yankee. That's the
47
same bag.
Yankee.
47 Yankee is this bag. Oh, here you go. Look at that.
There we go. So it shows all the photos that were taken of these samples after it was brought back to Earth. This is all coming from the curation website that NASA has. So this is now we're digging into the 50 years of research that have gone into that sample. But the place you found it in the website was the moment it was picked up. And you can hear what they're saying as they're picking it up and why they picked it up and all this context around it, right? So if you keep scrolling down, you'll on the right side, keep going. You should get to academic papers. There you go. So there's academic papers that have been written over the years that reference that sample number. So everything you just said, it's almost like you knew this existed with what you just said to me, because this is the context now. That these papers now have context to the mission, right?
Jake just lost the next 2 weeks of his work to this finding. He's getting nothing done the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, so the real interest there is that the person that wrote this paper, I can't see what year that was, but many years ago, possibly
2014. Yep.
Okay, not that many years ago. Probably never saw the moment that sample was collected. And or what papers were written next to this, or what sample was collected just before this one, and could that possibly add some context into what it is that I'm researching?
Yeah, this one has a ton. The next sample over has a ton of research papers about it from 70s and 80s. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Man, these pictures.
Yeah. So that, let's just, so I'm really investigating here, playing with the idea of putting post-mission data back into context in the mission. And then you're kind of making the timeline of the mission really an index for everything that comes after that mission. Mm-hmm. So like you were just mentioning about Artemis, we get to have that preserved before and after, moment of a sample being collected or action being taken or something. Is if we can tie in an unbroken chain of data, kind of like paper references are, right? Of that moment in time going forward through research, and then all the data collected in the lab being connected to the moment that it was. You're basically trying to create, like forever, an unbroken chain of information about that event that occurred on the moon.
Yeah. Huh. Wow, that's super cool. Yeah, and it's really exciting to think about. Thinking about Artemis, having this sort of foresight, which and it's not like the Apollo people didn't think about trying to like record stuff. Obviously they did, but just with 50 more years of experience and looking back at what happened with Apollo and knowing what was missing and what was great, what do we keep doing for Artemis? What do we stop doing? What do we add? What do we, all that kind of stuff. It's going to make that even better, I think. So I'm like almost excited for like the mission to be over so that you can do the post one so that I can watch it again, totally. Like differently, right?
With all the detail. Well, it's also funny to consider the context that, if you were to go and ask Gene Cernan right now when he's on the surface, like, will people study this rock that you just picked up for the next 50 years plus? Because he would have been like, obviously his little speech when they left the moon knew that we weren't coming back immediately, but I don't, he was pretty sure we were going to be back on the moon way before now. So these samples seemed at the time like, they were, the first couple samples we picked up off the moon, but there was no thinking that these were going to be as unique as they have remained for 50 years. Mm-hmm. Like, no one thought that this was going to be the main sample that was researched for 50 years and running. So the historical importance to them is, this is an obvious statement, but like, it's not obvious the historical importance of anything until it's actually history. And then it becomes like the most important thing we've ever picked up off the lunar surface. Yeah.
And it's also just the rarity of the material, like that for scientific purposes. So the historical importance is actually less important than the fact that it is pristine sample from the moon.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you're aware of the ANXA project that is underway and it was just a conference about it, but it's the Apollo Next Generation Sample Analysis project. And they opened a deep core sample that was collected at Station 3 of Apollo 17 for the first time. And this is 50 odd years after the mission, or just under 50 years, I think. And because they knew at the time of the mission, not just that we weren't going back in a long time, but it was why open all the samples now? All our technology is only at this level, and we know technology is progressing greatly. Why don't we just save some? Because if we're not going back, at least we could open them later, and we'll have better instruments. Like, what an amazing moment of foresight, from so many years ago. And that moment was this past year, where they did that analysis on that core at Station 3.
I don't feel like we have that similar outlook right now. Like, I feel like we're generally societally a little bit more like, we figured this out. Like, we have scanning electron microscopes. Like, come at us, future. We got all the stuff that we need right now.
Well, I mean, they did use some of the very latest techniques when they were doing the analysis on the core, including, X-ray computed tomography, 3D internal scans of the core before it was touched. And, the resolution of those things now is so much greater than what it was before. And I think it's always getting better. But yeah, it like the amount of sacrifice that took for the scientists at the time that could have just written another pile of, valuable papers at the time, but they went, no, we need to make this like difficult choice. So I just find that really compelling because it's so smart.
Yeah. I mean, planetary geology is such a young field that it makes sense. Like, forget the instruments for a second. Just 50 years of learning makes the context in our collective minds that much better. Even if you just took like the scientists from 1970 and all their instruments from 1970 and plopped them in today to talk with other, geologists who have now got 50 years of experience, like they'll learn tons of stuff just by all the collective work gone into that. So spreading it out is more than just instrumentation. I think it's just getting better as humans. So
have we articulated a plan on what we're going to do with the Mars samples, Jake?
Beyond broad strokes, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're building a facility and there's plans to share it with all the international partners and blah blah blah. But
yeah,
I'm
just wondering if we set aside a certain percentage for the future, or what the. How do you even figure?
There's a
it
whole
out?
team working on it, so I'm sure they will have some ideas around that.
They're like, listen, man, we're not thinking about that until that rocket takes off the surface. It's all just made up until then.
Yeah. I was just going to say, maybe you could claim that the time it's sitting on the surface waiting to be collected was that time. So just delay.
Well, that's not a bad point, because like if you think about, we started collecting samples with Perseverance a year ago. They're not going to be back till 2033. Is that where it's putting right now? So we'll have 12 years of geologists doing paper with all the remote instruments in that time. We're going to learn something new about those samples before they get home, for sure. Yeah.
And that atmospheric sample.
And the couple of them, yeah, the witness sample, yeah.
Ben, did you? So I can't imagine when you started this project, you were like, I'm also going to completely capture every research paper that's been written about every rock that was picked up off the surface. Like, how did you build out the roadmap for what pieces you were going to roll into this? And are there some that you haven't gotten to yet that you were hoping to now get into a mission timeline?
Yeah. So I didn't do the sample thing in the first release. When I met Noah Petro, he came fast with lots of ideas of things that could be added. And of course, somebody from NASA is interested in asking for things. I did it as fast as I humanly could. And I think I got all the academic papers into the interface in literally 3 days. Because it was like fire lit under me. I know, I just went into private sector, consultancy mode, and client asked for something, make it happen. Right. So I did that for that. I also rendered all of the traverses that happen with the rover using LRO 3D modeling material. So if you hover around and find a purple segment,
there was some we were just
anything
watching.
That's purple.
There's some purple stuff.
Yeah, purple stuff is there you go. That's LRO data that I've 3D rendered into where was the rover as you can hear them talking and driving, etc. So this was after I had initially released the tool, because this was just off, because the procedure was turn off the transmitter because the umbrella antenna on the rover is bouncing around anyway. It's not going to be fixed on the Earth, so don't waste the power. Turn off the transmitter and drive, in some cases, for like an hour to the next location, and then turn the transmitter back on again. So you could hear them talking, but you couldn't tell where they were. Huh. So I thought, well, maybe I could make a 3D rendering of that. And innocently asked Noah hey, do you have any data of where they landed? And he was like, that's literally what my job is. So yes, boom. And he gave me all this data. And I thought, oh no, now I have to do something with it. So that I had to Google my way through making these 3D renderings, right?
Was there any aspect of the LRO imagery of the tracks left in the regolith that you used to figure out which side of the rock did they drive around?
Yeah, no, that is not visible in the LRO data. You can see footprints because they disturbed the surface, like they were kicking underneath the dirt and upturning, in some cases, the darker material underneath. So you can see where the stations were because you can see some footprints in that area, but the driving to and from the stations is invisible. And there's actually a paper was just done this year on trying to recreate those traverses, but even that person was unable to use LRO data. And actually used projection data from the camera photos that were taken. So picture this, a prime lens on the camera on Jack Schmidt's chest, and he's hitting the shutter whenever he remembers to as they're driving. That was part of the procedure. So he'd take like,
Wait, was
40
that the
pictures.
actual procedure? Whenever you remember,
the procedure was,
fire one off.
yeah, it was like, hey Jack, don't forget to take some pictures. And from time to time, you'd hear him saying, "Oh no, I've been talking so much, I haven't been taking my pictures." So it certainly wasn't like on a timer or something, giving you situational awareness, but it really was for. There's one right there. That's a rover photo. You can see because of the TV cameras in the front. So Jack sitting on the right, and the picture he's taking into driving. So this person actually used the properties of that prime lens and extrapolated it into an orthographic view from the top down, and then did crater matching with LRO data to figure out exactly where the rover was at the time of every photo was taken. Now, you think I'm doing painstaking work. How's that? So
they probably just gave it to a grad.
Never want to have to do. Yeah,
grads,
right,
yeah, they task rabbited that. Mechanical Turk is pretty cheap these days. Honestly, there's a whole subreddit, right, of like, where on earth was this taken, and people are like, that's the sign from the Wendy's on Route 47 by me. Like, I know exactly where that is.
That's funny. So I would like to know, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about tech stuff, which surprised me, but I do want to know just like a couple things about like even just the app like itself and how you put that together. Sure. Like, are you a web developer? Did you have to learn that stuff? Like what was the sort of the strategy behind, getting, once you've gone through the 11,000 hours and stuck it on a database somewhere, like how did you get it into this nice interface?
Yeah, well, thank you. So I am a web developer. That's my number one thing that I've done for my whole career. I'm 25 years into my career at this point or so. So I dated myself earlier talking about CD-ROMs, but that was what I started out doing in the 90s. And multimedia was actually an amazing thing back then, because when the rest of the internet was dial-up, you had like 600 megs of data you could play off a CD-ROM. Like, it was a huge difference, and it took probably 20 years or 15 for the internet to catch up to that differential. So making the app was actually the easiest part. It took me probably 4 months to make the app. The data was the years and years of work. So I'm a good user experience person. I'm a good developer. I am not a good designer. So I did rope in some help from a friend who's a designer, and I kind of gave him my like poorly laid out prototype, like, here it is, and he was like, no one cares about the transcript. You can't make the transcript that big. It's all about these photos. The photos are so gorgeous. Like, you look at these things, and I was like, dude, do you know how long it took me to make the transcript? Like, years.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Anyway, of course he was right. So what you see there is my friend Chris Bennett's design for what the layout could look like. I had already made that navigation thing at the top, and he kind of just refined the colors in it and stuff, and made some of the corners rounded, etc. But he did the layout, like the bigger component layout, and then he did the fine adjustments on the visual design. The rest was just app development. It is written in pretty much vanilla JavaScript. It's not using any frameworks or anything. And thank goodness I didn't use a framework, because in 2015 that would have meant Angular 1. And now I would have
talk about dating
Angular
yourself.
1 app I was carrying and feeding for. So it's kind of like jQuery and vanilla JavaScript kind of horribleness to look at now that I'm a React developer. Know about how to do that now. I'd like to do it again in React at this point, but anyway, it's like fast. It turns out I was making a super lean and mean app, because there's no framework. It's just the browser's just doing what it needs to do to make the app work. And I think maybe another noteworthy thing is that nav thing at the top is all in the canvas. So that's not HTML. That's using a canvas drawing tool called Paper.js, which is, again, closer to the way you used to be able to do things in Flash and the earlier internet. because I, kind of had an idea of what I needed to make, but I didn't want to have to translate that through what CSS allows you to make. So this was literally like drawing lines. I can draw lines and make what I need it to be.
Yeah.
There is no back end to this app. It's just all front end. So it loads the whole mission at the beginning when it loads the page.
Oh, really?
And then all the transcripts, all the index of all the photos, all like a bunch of indexes of things, the indexes of all those papers and everything is like loaded in the nanosecond it takes for the page to come up, because browsers are ridiculously fast. I really didn't want to pay for hosting. That's why there's no backend. There was no other reason to not have a backend. It's all CSV data files hosted at a CDN, and I just load them all in, and your browser does all the work. All the videos are on YouTube because that was free.
This feels like the only way to do an app about the past is like just like do it all vanilla and like the simplest. Like I love it. Yeah.
Jake, he's speaking my language. Music to my ears. This whole thing. Yeah.
This is GitHub pages and.
Yeah, man.
Right.
Listen, if they're gonna foot that hosting bill, might as well.
To host?
Yeah. Once they made that free a couple years ago,
it kicks off a workflow. And oh man, I love it.
I had 1 million visitors, 1.2 million visitors during the Apollo 11 anniversary, and it cost me like $400.
That's amazing. How much did it cost Netlify or whoever's hosting the front end?
GitHub's like, why do we make this free again?
Yeah. That's right.
Cloudflare is just like eating up all that. Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, no, Cloudflare is a big part of this thing. Yeah.
Huh.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know what else to really tell you about the code. It's like I just kept asking the browser to do more, and it kept not complaining. And I've since this app built another app it's just insane what it's asking the browser to do, and it's no problem. Like cheap, low RAM laptop, no problem. Everything works great. Like,
yeah.
The embarrassment of riches we have for computers in this, like now in current times, is ridiculous. Like you can be the most like careless, inefficient coder ever, and to no problem. Like, it's really remarkable what browsers can do.
I made this little library in NPM that's just a little calculator for Mars dates. So you give it an Earth date and it turns it into a Mars date. And so I made a website for that, and it's got it loads a live clock. And so, as you know, like with a live clock, you just really just make a new date that second, every second, and recalculate the math. And the math is like, it does like 17 operations through all this like crazy stuff, and it's just redoing that every second on the browser every time you load this, because I don't have a backend for this either. So it's funny. It's exactly what I'm thinking, and it's doing it 7 times because I've got all the missions on there too. So that's always kind of interesting.
Yeah. I noticed that you had on. I don't know if this was your Twitter or something that I was scoping you out on, that you mentioned that you had some part in the Apollo 11 movie a couple years ago. I'm curious to hear about that.
Yep. Oh, sure. Yes, that was a lot of fun. I got to do just enough work that I got to, go to Sundance Film Festival and be part of a film team. But really, I didn't make the film. The other people made the film. But it was really wonderful to work with a group of people that wanted to make something so historically accurate. Because, of course, now I'm a stickler for that. This is what happens after you spend all this time painstakingly assembling historical data, is you start caring about historical accuracy. So what I contributed to it was I was a technical advisor, which means I get rough cut and give notes on stuff I noticed that was not represented correctly, which is not, like, it's impossible in this movie because it's all historical material. So the only things I'd catch were, you can't cut down and edit what somebody said in Mission Control. Like, you need to give the whole sentence, things like that. Because the filmmakers are trying to make something that a whole audience can enjoy, and in this case, are only going to use things they are not directing. Like, they're not the film team. There's no narrator. There's no guide, and it's just historical material. So it's just things said in Mission Control. So I did technical advice on it. And then all that work I mentioned about the 30-track audio in Mission Control was basically around this film too. So I gave all that material back to the film and said, hey, I've time corrected everything. So now we can find things because you couldn't find, you just had this pile, this haystack of 11,000 hours of 30-track audio. And now you had a wayfinding when and who, and you could kind of, using that type of coordinate system, what console, what time. And this other guy on the team named Stephen from the UK actually used that to put sound to all the silent 16 millimeter footage that was shot in Mission Control. So all of that material that's in Apollo 11 that's in Mission Control was all silent. There was no sync sound.
Wow.
And Stephen figured out, who is that? What time would they have been on shift? Found it in the 30-track audio, looked around for waveforms that looked like the lips that were moving.
Oh my God.
Oh, got one. And he probably did that for over 100 clips. I think it was 100 and some odd
wow.
clips.
So he's probably looking at that person in the back was talking at the time that I want this other person to be talking in the movie. So let me see when that was and then find this person. It's an unreal job.
Wow.
Yeah. He got to know the two film guys that were he knew the names of the I think one was Bird and the other was, I can't remember now, but he when were they on smoke break, which was on shift, what were the roles named, based on the handwriting of the slates and things that are in the historical footage. And anyway, that was a special project. I haven't even mentioned the 70 millimeter film that was found in the National Archives and the scanning of that. And so that's definitely a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to work on something like that. And also then it hit for the anniversary of the mission, and it became essentially one of the primary things people were using to remember the mission, and the other hopefully being Apollo in real time, which I jokingly referred to as the 240-hour cut of the film. If you want it all, it's there. All those sync clips are there, all the Mission Control audio is there, everything is there. If you want a theatrical version, then cut that down to an hour and a half and you get the Apollo 11 movie.
That's 240-hour cut. That's amazing. Man, that was amazing.
Well, okay.
ApolloInRealTime.org, peeps. If you have not checked it out,
yeah,
what are you doing with your life? And the answer is nothing for the next week as you watch this. Just like Jake now searching back through all of the sample archives now.
Yeah. Got some work to do, that's for sure. Ben, thanks so much for hanging out with us. If the listeners want to follow you somewhere, are you have social media? What's your internet presence?
At Feisty.
Yeah, I guess Twitter.
At Feisty.
That's right. Feisty. Mastodon. No, really, I think it's Twitter, although I have been taking a hiatus from social media, so I generally announce things there, but that's pretty much it. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, that's probably the best way. Cool. Thanks for having me. It's been really wonderful talking to you guys.
It's been long overdue. We because of scheduling missed the actual 50th anniversary of Apollo 17, but I'm glad that we made this work. Shouldn't have launched in December. That really crunched our timeline later on, but if we could go back and tweak their schedule, say this is really buttoned right up against the holidays, guys. Maybe we could scooch this back a couple weeks. Jake, you've got some crazy show coming out in a little bit. I don't know if you want to tease it.
Yeah, on Tuesday I got a show coming out over on We Martians. It's the wildest story in planetary history, I think, planetary science history. It's the origin story of the founding of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And so there's a journalist in Los Angeles, MG Lord, who did a whole series about this. It's coming out every week. They're dropping an episode. It's kind of in process right now that tells the story. And it's just it's funny because I was doing the interview this week, and she opens up with kind of a highlight of what it is, and it's like such a dense collection of words and expressions I never thought I would say on We Martians, like things like sex cults and communist McCarthyism and the occult, and like it's just the wildest stuff you can imagine in the weird history of JPL. So we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be fun.
The Jake Propulsion Laboratory.
The Jake Propulsion Laboratory.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Hey, next week I'm going to be driving down to Virginia for a Rocket Lab launch. They delayed it right up until I could go again, so it looks like it might be a little windy, so I'm hoping that it actually goes off before the show next week, but I think we'll talk about that. I'm trying to convince Caleb Henry to drive down with me, but we'll see if he does. So, consider this pressure if you're listening, Caleb.
Yeah. I can't wait. I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, we're going to catch up on small launch next week, I believe, on this show.
Yes, we are, yeah.
There's been some failures.
News. Yeah.
It's been a bad week for the small launchers, so.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully Rocket Lab turns it around and doesn't make it 3 for 3.
Yeah. Well, there's works generally, so.
Yeah.
It should be okay.
It's a good reminder that this stuff is really hard.
Yeah. I like, we'll get into this next week, but ABL's update that was like, a fire may have spread into the engine compartment. I'm like, do you think it may have spread, or did it spread into the engine compartment? I don't know why you're being dodgy about this and the wording, but that's a whole topic for next week, Jake.
All right, sounds good.
Anyway, thanks for hanging out, and
thanks, Ben.
we'll see y'all next week.
Bye, everybody.